Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv, here with a very special re-air episode. And I say that at this point, when I'm recording this introduction, I don't even actually know what episodes exactly I'm going to choose to put together into this re-air, but I can tell you the theme. The theme is trans people have always been here, that trans people are people in the exact same way that cis people are people. And I mean, maybe that's not so much a theme as it is an acknowledgement of the basic laws of humanity. But as I think all of us are aware, this is somehow something that is more and more contentious every day. And that is horrifying in a way that I just have so much trouble even talking about. I throughout the last 6 months, I guess. Throughout the last 6 months, there has been so much horrific shit coming out of the government in America, and particularly when it comes to trans issues, also the government in the UK. And I just I feel like, I mean, under normal circumstances, this is stuff that I'd want to be addressing in episodes. But, it's happening at such speeds that it's almost impossible. And that's horrifying in itself, that's so scary. And that's kind of the point, right? Because if they overwhelm us with the horrors of trying to convince us that trans people aren't real, I don't even know what it is because it's so lax in logic, or the horrors of an active genocide happening in Gaza, no matter what all of us scream about the fact that all human life matters, all of this is just happening so fast. And that is the point, right? It's to exhaust us. And I won't be the first to say this to you, and I shouldn't be the last, but, there's a reason they say the revolution won't be televised. And that does apply to social media, to podcasts. This is stuff that we need to be working on in real life, and I won't pretend I have any answers at all. But we do need one. We do need a revolution of the left and just people who think everyone deserves rights. It's wild. I just think that all humans are created equal. Wild. Anyway, this intro was actually supposed to, simply introduce that I'm going to be re-airing some trans stories here because I think it's really important. Unfortunately, there aren't that many, so there isn't really a point in me trying to do these episodes again, because for the most part, I've done them all fairly recently with my current, knowledge and sources and all of that. And so I'm just going to be sharing them again with you. Obviously, this also helps me because I am also trying to write a book and form this collective into something that benefits all of us, particularly in this time. So I appreciate you listening to this re-aired episode. But I also want to say before this starts that, aside from the basic logic of trans people are human and we should just let them be who they are and just stop giving a shit what is in another person's pants because it's not my fucking business. But there are so many people who will parrot the same propagandic bullshit, let this protect cis women in bathrooms or whatever. And, I hope this won't be the first you're all hearing about how absolutely absurd that argument is, because, in order for that anything to be one, I don't feel unsafe if a trans person is in the bathroom with me. Never, literally never in a million years would I feel unsafe, unless they were behaving in a distinctly unsafe way, which I can't fathom happening, based on all of my life experiences. But who I can imagine feeling unsafe around, particularly in a bathroom, men. Just cisgender men. Cisgender men are the ones who are a threat, statistically, and based on, I would say, almost all of my listeners, I would assume, are lived experiences. And the reason I heard this on TikTok a while back, and I really wish I'd bookmarked it or record. I wish I remembered who said this, because I don't want to pretend that what I'm going to say is something that I came up with. It was absolutely a trans person I heard it from, and so I feel very bad that I don't remember. But it was sort of in answer to a question about, why do conservatives have so many, feel so threatened by trans people? Like, why are they so obsessed with trans people, I guess, is really the point. And this person's answer was to really just point out that trans people are one of the biggest threats to the patriarchal structure that we are all forced to live under. And I think it's so interesting to view people that way and the concept that way, because the idea is that, the patriarchal structure that rules us all, that has since before the ancient Greeks, this patriarchal structure that I've devoted so much of my life to breaking down when it comes to ancient Greek myth and the ancient Greek world more broadly. But that structure hinges on the idea that women are inherently inferior to men. And if a trans person, a trans woman, could be a person who was born physiologically, biologically as a man, but is a woman and has that transformation in whatever way they feel is right, that basic structure of men being inherently inferior, and of course this applies to trans men as well, right? That someone could be born biologically a woman and then be a man in practice and in their life, like that completely tears apart the entire structure of the patriarchy, because it points out the fact that all humans are human and that there is no inherent power structure in the nature, the biology of it all, that the entire patriarchal structure under which we live, under which our necks, that was a terrible way of just boot on the neck analogy that I failed, but that entire structure falls apart if we recognize the fact that gender is a construct, that gender is a human invention. Gender, the word in English, comes from genre. It is a construct in the same way that romance versus action is a construct. It is a way that we as humans understand the world around us, but it is not inherent. It is not objective. It is not any kind of real truth. And when trans people exist in their truest and most wonderful forms, their mere existence is a threat to the patriarchy. And that is why conservatives and those terrible women who have aligned themselves with the patriarchy, why they are so obsessed. Because, you take, for example, the woman we all fucking hate, the woman who ruined so many of our childhoods by showing herself to be the most horrific of bigots. She has attained all of the patriarchal power that she possibly can. She is a white woman from the privileged West who is a billionaire, right? She has achieved every single thing that she physically can under the patriarchal capitalistic world that we live in. And so she now has reached this only point where, in order for her to gain any kind of leverage, I guess, in this patriarchy, she has to take down the people who threaten that patriarchal structure. She has achieved so much in this patriarchal structure that she is so completely obsessed with maintaining it, right? Because the thing that those people who call themselves feminists don't want you to realize is that when feminism excludes trans people, not only is it not feminism because feminism is the basic idea of equality among genders, but it reveals the fact that their version of feminism defers to men, that their version of feminism is so in line with the patriarchal structure and the requirements of the patriarchy that it ceases to function as feminism. Because if your entire concern is upholding the gender binary, then your entire concern is upholding the patriarchal boot on our necks. There's the analogy. And so this intro was not meant to be 10 minutes, but I think it's important in an episode like this, and it's important right now, and I haven't had the chance to really have a rant like this just because of how I've had to be putting out these episodes so that I can work on all of these other projects. And I needed this, and I hope you all did too. But for now, let's listen to some stories that are just some of the really, really large, like enormous amount of proof that exists that trans people are just as natural as cis people, that trans people are timeless, that gender is a complete construct, and even the people in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, let alone beyond, these stories are just from there, but it was certainly true so far beyond. But I mean, if people 2,500 years ago could recognize that gender is fluid and can be shifted depending upon how the person living it feels, why the fuck can't we? Before we get fully into the story of Caeneus transforming into Caeneus, a quick trigger warning. There is assault here, and it's Poseidon, so it's a bit worse to talk about than most. I'm not going to dwell on it, though, because I want to tell you Caeneus' story more positively this time. Just a heads up.
But a character like Caeneus, who starts out life as Caeneus, does seem to me genuinely to be a transgender character. I used he pronouns as much as I possibly could for Caeneus. Ovid clearly identifies Caeneus as masculine throughout, except there is the scene when Caeneus is still inhabiting a female body where he is raped by Neptune, and Neptune wants to make some kind of recompense afterwards. It's not unusual for gods to want to do that. He says, well, what would you like? And Caeneus says, well, I want to be a man. I want to have a male form. And I see that as, yes, it means that he thinks that this would make him less likely to be a victim of rape. But I also think that Caeneus has been living in a way that conforms to expectations of masculinity. And so he wants the male form. And so he's a really fascinating character. And immediately Ovid describes Caeneus as wandering through, he uses a word that's often used of penetration. He's penetrating the plowlands, the Arwa of Caeneus. And it's a very, very clear, sexual reference. He becomes a penetrator immediately. And
yeah.
Charles Martin translated this as like he delights in his new phallicity or something like that. I tried to get, I think I said like bushlands. I tried to get some kind of, thing that would evoke female genitalia. But at any rate, yeah, so Caeneus is a way that Ovid can explore transgender identity very interestingly. And then you have this, Caeneus becomes a sort of impenetrable warrior in the centaur Amyclae. And you have this centaur who comes out and obviously doesn't like Caeneus. And the way that he chooses to insult Caeneus is by essentially calling him by his dead name. And it's so interesting that is such a source of, insult and disrespect in Ovid. And of course, transgender people would say that is a source of disrespect and insult as well. And so it's interesting that the insult comes from the same place. And, but none of the warriors around Caeneus see him as anything other than a really amazing male warrior. And I have a soft spot for Caeneus. I really love him.
I'd always read that story similarly, just in terms of it not being, because I think a lot of people will come to me with like, oh, but is it just, an attempt not to be raped? And I just think, like, it's not that that's not a way you can read it, but it is so much nicer and more like validating, I think, to read it as that's what he wanted all along. It's an interesting story, but I remember really enjoying that one as well. You basically talking to you about this has made me think like, okay, I need to jot down all these names so I can like reimagine them as well, because so many I've done like years ago on the podcast. I'm like, it's been too long. I need to do it again. Right. But that's definitely one of them.
But it's clear to me that Caeneus, if it's about identity in the body, Caeneus so identifies with his new body. I mean, he's when he does end up dying, which is very sad. And the one of the Greek characters hails him as the Maxime Weir. He's the greatest man. And so there's a real he identifies clearly to me as a not just a man, but like a warrior. He does manly masculine things. And the fight he has with the centaurs is so laden with sexual innuendo, and he's penetrating with his sword. I tried to really play that up a lot.
I really want to reread this. It's been too long, and I'm like, I definitely remember talking about him as a trans character. But I'm glad to hear that there's like also so much backing on that too, of like, the level of like, no, he is thrilled to be the manliest man.
So thrilled. I mean, the language of penetration that Ovid uses throughout, and you can know that Ovid is so delighting in this. I mean, I had a lot of like thrusting and swiveling and things like that would clearly suggest this is battle, but it's really, it's really sex that we're talking about here.
Oh, that's great. Oh, there's so much in the Metamorphoses. I was like, I mean, every time I open it up again, I'm like, oh my God, he manages to fit so much incredible content and so many stories into this. Even just reading the Medea, I was reminded how much like even just her dragon chariot rides are also Ovid's way of like peppering in these other transformations that he didn't have enough time to devote whole stories to them. So he's like, okay, here you go. Like these ones are also just, she sees them down below. So they're also happening, but I'm not going to tell you much about them. It's just it's just so lovely.
And any one of them could have been a major story, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And I was like Googling each individual one to see what the story was behind it. And so often it was just like, it's just this reference in Ovid. I was like, okay, cool. So he's just like kind of really into just bringing up these, like either he had a source that we don't know, which is certainly possible, or he's just like, nah, I just love transformations.
Right.
Like, the first mention of Caeneus' origin story is not about the female that he was born as, but the man that he is at the time the story is being told. His story is being told by Nestor during the Trojan War. He's speaking around a fire to a group of gathered Greeks. Achilles is among them. He's telling stories from his past, since he's the oldest and full of great stories of greater heroes. One of them is Caeneus. Nestor introduces Caeneus, quote, I once saw Thessalian Caeneus bear 1,000 wounds with no harm to his body. Thessalian Caeneus, who won fame through deeds and lived on Othrys, and, what's more amazing, had been born female. At this introduction, Achilles is absolutely sold on the story of Caeneus and immediately asks Nestor to speak more about him. Who was he? What did he do? How did he change sex? And it is changing sex, not gender, in these myths because it's magic, divinity, a god's will. Nestor is very happy to tell Achilles all that he knows. In Thessaly, Caeneus was born a girl and given the name Caeneus. Her beauty became famous, known all over the region, and of course this meant that there were many, many men wishing to marry her. Nestor tells Achilles that Caeneus was from the same region as him, and Peleus, Achilles' father, might have even sought to marry her, had he not already been meant to marry Achilles' mother, Thetis. None of that matters, though, because Caeneus had absolutely no desire to marry any man at all. She had no interest and turned down every single suitor that ever came to her. Someone born biologically a woman, and we can imagine who sees herself at this time as such, by then still wants to avoid marriage, and that rarely ends happily. And so one day when Caeneus was walking along the beach, she was found by none other than Neptune, Poseidon. And gods, is that always a horrifying idea? Poseidon really just he lurks just below the surface as the most dangerous man of myth, pun intended. And he assaults Caeneus, and then when he's finished, he wants to give her something in return. Quote, "Whatever you desire, you'll have it. Now make a wish." Caeneus, who's just experienced a seriously traumatic event, is surprisingly level-headed and more than aware of what to ask for. Quote, "Such an assault demands a major wish. Make it impossible for me to suffer such a thing again. Make me not female. That is all I want." By the time the final sentence is spoken, Caeneus' voice was already deeper. But not only did Neptune immediately grant the wish, he made Caeneus almost invincible. He can't be wounded now, he can't be killed by a sword, and gods, Caeneus is thrilled. Quote, "Caeneus, rejoicing in this gift, sets off. He spends his life in masculine pursuits, rambling through the bushlands of Peneus." That's the entirety of Caeneus' transformation story, though we're going to return to the rest of his story in a minute. First, I want to dwell here, because when I first told this story, I really focused on the trauma response. The idea that Caeneus had been assaulted and saw that the only way to avoid another experience like that was to be a man. And well, that's fucking depressing as shit. But it was my conversation with Stephanie McCarter about this new translation that made me want to revisit this story. She talked about the language that Ovid uses here and how it seems to emphasize the idea that actually this kind of transformation was what Caeneus wanted all along. He was always a trans man, he just didn't really know it, or maybe he just didn't have the chance to live it until Neptune granted him the wish. Stephanie mentioned this in our chat, but this use of the word bushlands is so evocative here, so I'm going to read the end note that she has about it. Quote, "Ovid uses a sexual pun as he presents Caeneus in a masculine, penetrative role, roaming through the countryside. Arvum, plowable field, is a slang term for female genitalia, and plowing is a euphemism for sex." She even goes on to add that some scholars suggest that Peneus, the fields, is actually a play on penis. All to say that with phrasing and innuendos like that, so intentionally included by Ovid, it certainly seems to, like this was exactly what Caeneus wanted, rather than a last-ditch effort to avoid more trauma. It also implies that just like Iphis and Ianthe, Ovid also saw their transformations as positive outcomes for their characters. The transformations just solidified what these trans men already knew about themselves or gave them the opportunity to know it about themselves. They just had the fortune of having the gods there to help them transition biologically. And alternatively to Iphis, whose story is a bit more confused, uncertain in terms of how he feels about gender and himself, Caeneus' story had additional layers that really emphasize that he is, and perhaps always knew, that he was trans. The whole story is actually told as a rumor that Nestor heard, whereas most of the story Nestor is telling during the war is his own experiences. This bit of backstory has come to him from elsewhere. He makes clear that while he doesn't know it for certain, he's telling the rumor about Caeneus' transformation, and not for any salacious, gossipy reason, but because the history of this incredible hero only makes him more interesting, more incredible. Not for overcoming anything, mind you, just for being who he was. Also, and this is coming from the article that I mentioned, which is linked in the episode's description for anyone who wants to read more, Caeneus, unlike Iphis, is often described using not only masculine forms of Latin words, but ones that are awkward and ill-fitting to the sentence because they're coming when Caeneus is still Caeneus. Speaking specifically of him being born a woman, and yet some masculine endings are used. I won't pretend like I know enough Latin to dive too deep into that, and I don't think you want me to anyway, but the point is that Ovid is being really intentional. He's using intentional and oftentimes weird and awkward and inappropriate almost language to speak about this distinctly masculine hero who happened to start his life as a biological woman. It's also important that Nestor's first mention of him isn't about his origins as a woman, but as the man that he was when Nestor knew him. It's this epic Greek hero who'd done great epic Greek hero things. He was all man. And then we get this history where we learn a bit more about him and what he went through to become the great man that he always was meant to be. All to say, while the story of Iphis can be read as either the story of a trans man or a masculine lesbian who just wanted to be accepted and love who she loved, the story of Caeneus is very explicitly the story of someone trans, even if Ovid didn't have the same terminology to use. He is very clear that this was someone who was born biologically a woman but was always meant to be a great man. And so just a god helped him do it. Caeneus' story picks up later in the Metamorphoses, still in a story being told by Nestor during the war, but he picks it back up when he shifts to speaking about the war between the Lapiths and the Centaurs. We're back now to how he introduced Caeneus to begin with, as a man that he knew in his past. Caeneus, in all his almost invincible glory, is fighting the Centaurs alongside Nestor. But we also know that before this battle, Caeneus had also participated in the Caledonian boar hunt with our girl Atalanta, and even maybe was one of the Argonauts. Caeneus doesn't appear in any great detail in Greek surviving sources, but his general importance and bravery and skill in battle is pretty clear from what little that we know. He was always meant for greatness. And Ovid, too, seems to be the first source that actually gives Caeneus a backstory that includes being assigned female at birth, whereas in the Greek story, Caeneus only ever features described as a man. By the time we return to Caeneus as he is fighting these centaurs, he's already killed 5 of them, quote, Stephalus, Bromus, Antimachus, axe-armed Pyracmon, and Elymas. I don't recall their wounds. I marked the count and names. And Nestor goes on, detailing the battle as it happened before him. The centaurs coming at them from all angles. He describes the centaur that Caeneus is about to go up against, named Letrius. And Letrius seems hardcore. He's one to be reckoned with. Nestor describes him stalking his enemy, flashing weapons, just waiting to take them all out. When this asshole centaur starts making transphobic jokes to Caeneus, misgendering him and calling him by his dead name, telling him that he'll always be female, that he can't escape it, even reminding Caeneus of the assault that he had experienced, how it was that that he was transformed into a man, that he is now. He even has the nerve to suggest that this epic hero who's just killed 5 of his centaur brothers go off and pick up weaving instead. Now, centaurs are usually pieces of shit, like it's kind of their thing, but this one really goes above and beyond. Like, we've got a turf centaur. Reminds me of a certain woman that I used to praise and how we now speak of her with disdain and disgust. She is that centaur. But Caeneus isn't taking any shit. He knows himself, knows who he is, and so while this centaur runs his asshole mouth, Caeneus just lets loose an arrow from his bow, piercing the centaur's side as he screams in pain. Latreus tries to come at Caeneus in response, but Caeneus' flesh can't be pierced by any weapon, so the centaur's spear just rebounds right in his face. He tries again and he fails again. Then he starts trying to taunt Caeneus, suggesting he'll use his blade to slice instead of spear. That'll do it. He even takes aim at Caeneus' groin. Not unintentional, I'm certain. But nope, that won't do it either. Caeneus just can't be wounded that way. It's almost as though transitioning made his skin thicker than most. His very own defensive shield for transphobic turfy centaurs. Finally, he turns on Latreus and, with a sneer, says, quote, "Now let me try your body with my blade," before he thrusts his spear into the centaur, giving it a few twists. And once again, it is not a coincidence that Caeneus kills this turfy centaur with a bit of penetration, because, well, he is truly a penetrator. Now, all of the centaurs try to injure Caeneus, but they can't do it either. And gods, does this make them angry. They are so pissed off and embarrassed. They can't handle that they're being bested by this man, that he's going to take them all out. One of them yells to the others, quote, "One man defeats our tribe? Hardly a man, and yet he is the man. Our impotence makes us what he once was." Which, like, okay, centaurs, as if you weren't shitty enough, you're just gonna throw in transphobia and unnecessary jabs at women? Fuck you guys. They begin to question what good they are if they can't beat this one man. What good is their horse-like strength, their divine origins, if they can't best Caeneus? But unfortunately, then one of them gets an idea. Or rather, an idea is spawned from their raging, from their fury about being so utterly useless against Caeneus. They think to overwhelm him, to crush him under the weight of trees, ripped just from the earth. And that is what they do. They strip the mountain of trees, piling them atop Caeneus quickly enough that he can't free himself before it's too late. Nestor tells that some say the weight of the trees on Caeneus pushed him straight to Tartarus, but he doesn't believe that. Instead, both Nestor and another man, Mopsus, saw a golden-winged bird fly up from the pile of trees and into the air. It hovered over the camp long enough to be seen before screeching and flying off. And so Mopsus at the sight cried out, quote, "Hail, Caeneus, glory of the Lapiths, the greatest man once, now a matchless bird." And the rest of the Lapiths that were fighting the centaurs used their rage and their grief over the fate of their friend, and they didn't stop until half the centaurs were dead at their hands and the other half had fled in fear. The way Ovid tells these stories of Iphis and Caeneus is just as important as the stories themselves when it comes to examining what he's intending with their genders. While he does sometimes gender them as female at the beginning of their stories and before their respective transformations, just as I have done, as this article by J.L. Watson says, even when he's doing this, quote, he is careful to undercut any feminizing words, either through immediate use of a counterbalancing masculine, or through distancing and challenging the discourse that seeks to feminize these men.
But the question itself, or the statement itself, "Make me not a woman," is so ambiguous.
Yeah.
And again, people like scholars have gone in different directions on that. Is this just saying patriarchy is shit, which it is, so I don't want to be a woman under this system? Or is this saying I actively want to be a man?
Yeah.
To me, in my reading, the fact that the first thing that Caeneus does after being transformed is go out and penetrate some Thessalian fields.
Yeah.
I'm like...
That's what I read too. I was like, this is what tells me that I'm going to read this story as a nice thing that happened instead of a horror show. Because it is, I mean, one, that's a more enjoyable way of reading it. Neptune is bad enough without, adding any more. But then, I forgot about that until you said it. I was like, oh, I can hear myself like reading that to the listeners because it was a lot. Yeah.
It's so, like, to me, that just feels like a deliberate, explicit thing.
Yeah.
But the other really interesting thing that's going on with Caeneus that I don't really talk about in the article, because I might have missed this 5 years ago when I wrote the article.
Well, you've got it now.
But, have the great opportunity when I'm teaching students now to be like, this is why scholarship can be rubbish, because sometimes your humble lecturer can fully forget or not put something in an article, but at least you get to have it in the classroom now, 5 years later. Is that Ovid doesn't invent the character Caeneus. Like, Caeneus has a literary history before he turns up in Ovid. Mm-hmm. And most of that's pretty simple, right? So he turns up in Homer. He's one of the heroes. It's all good. He turns up in the Argonautica, where he's one of the heroes there, and he's a great soldier. And that's where we first get the first idea that maybe his skin is unbreakable, which the Ovid really plays with, that his skin is unbreakable. But he also turns up in Virgil, and that's the thing I think I completely forgot when writing this article. Is so briefly he turns up in Virgil. But when he turns up in Virgil, it's during the book 6 of the Aeneid, where Aeneas is going down into the underworld to find out about how great Rome is going to be.
Right.
And he goes down, he's just about to go and see Dido again after fucking her over in book 4. And he sees this crowd of women from mythology. And so he goes down, he sees like Phaedra and Euryphile and Pasiphae and all these kind of women from Greek mythology, particularly Greek tragedy. And he also sees Caeneus, who is called Caeneus there, so give him this like masculine name.
Yeah.
Who I think Virgil says was once transformed into a man.
Huh.
But has clearly or maybe reverted back to being a woman once in the underworld.
Yeah.
And it's quite ambiguous, like exactly what's going on there. Once a man, now a woman is what seems to be the force there in the underworld. So that's whether Virgil invents that or not, we don't know. Mm-hmm. But there's already before Ovid this little suggestion that maybe we can play with the gender in this mythology a little bit. Mm-hmm. And actually, Caeneus has already turned up in the Metamorphoses at least once as well.
Right.
Back in book 8. So this story takes place in book 12.
Yeah.
Book 8, in the story of Atalanta and the Caledonian boar hunt.
Right. Because he's another one of those, right?
He's another one, exactly.
Yeah,
he's another one of the ones.
Like in every hero story.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is all part of it. Like, if thinking about what your reader who's never read the Metamorphoses is reading and thinks he's in Caeneus, they go, I know that man. That is a powerful, heroic, superhero man from the Age of Heroes, from the Iliad, from all these other books. So I think Virgil's already saying, ooh, but what if he was a woman? And then Ovid goes, what if I can exploit this even more and make this into the whole story? What if the whole story is not really about him being this heroic man, but it's actually about how he became that heroic man?
Yeah.
Because in book 8, when he turns up, he's there, and I'll give you the Latin because it's quite, you could read it in a couple of ways. So it's a long category of all the heroes who are helping out Meleager and Atalanta kill the Caledonian boar. And we get Iam non femina Caeneus, so no longer a woman Caeneus.
Right.
But Ovid's not mentioned him before, so clearly Ovid's going, you remember in Virgil when he was a woman but is now a man and then was a woman again. Well, now he's no longer a woman.
Yeah.
And now 4 books later, I'm going to tell you the story of why he's no longer a woman. So it's he's playing around with that so much deliberately.
Well, and I wonder if the Virgil is is necessarily attempting to say that he was a woman again in the underworld, or was if he was just included because he was once a woman.
Yeah.
Because by saying Caeneus and not, well, though I guess we can't necessarily know if the name Caeneus would have been known as the alternative, but yeah, that's interesting.
He definitely says that. Yeah, and it's a little bit ambiguous, because so it's literally he goes as a companion also who was once a young man, now a woman, Caeneus.
Oh, okay.
Once again turned back into his old form by fate. But what's the old form? Was the old form a man or a woman? You know, it's it's so deliberately playing around with it. So Ovid just clearly goes, there's a myth I can exploit, and if I'm doing my poem all about transformation, here's a story where I can talk about transformation, and look, maybe I'm not just transforming the gender of this character, I'm also transforming the literary tradition. Do you see what I did there? You know, this is the sort of thing Ovid loves to do.
That's very Ovid. Let's Talk About Myths Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Pangawish is the Hermes to my Olympians, my incredible producer. Select music by Luke Chaos. The podcast is part of the Memory Collective Podcast Network, a group of creators and educators dedicated to sharing knowledge that is accessible, contextualized, socially conscious, and inclusive. To find out more, visit collectivemem.com. Listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you are at all eager for every episode ad-free and or bonus material and or beautifully little thank you notes that come on these cool little branded postcards with stickers, which exclusive stickers, which are like holographic and shimmery and cool, or even a pin. Anyway, all of that is available via the Oracle edition on my Patreon, which is my latest attempt to get us outside of capitalism, at least as much so that I am not entirely relying on the economics of ads in order to keep this going. If that made sense, go to patreon.com/mythsbaby. Either way, thank you all so goddamn much for listening. I am Liv, and I love this shit.